What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. I'm not going to lie, the main focus of today's show was primarily going to be quarterback rankings and the First Mountain West Power Ranking of 2025. We're still certainly going to focus a large portion of the share on that. I'll just kind of rank the quarterbacks in the preseason 1 through 12 based on how tough I think it will be to stop them based on a variety of factors. We'll get into all of that. I'll kind of give an outlook for the league, going into this season, who I feel like are the real contenders, who are the pretenders. We've talked about it. If you listen to the show consistently, I don't think anything will be too surprising to you on there, although when we end up sharing the graphic on social where I have UNLV will probably ruffle some feathers. On the beginning here, I am going to talk about what's relevant in the college football media world today, and that is the concept of claiming national championships and whether it is a valid or corny act to do. I'll give some thoughts on 1915. If you missed it, just briefly, I don't remember if I tweeted about this or not. I had said a couple of times I would give an update on where some former Rams are. Just briefly, real quick, Mekhi Fox, former four-star prospect. He's going to be at Eastern Michigan this fall. Spent last year at Pasadena Community College at 30 catches, 428 yards, 6 touchdowns. Dawson Menegatti, another former CSU receiver, he will be playing against CSU for UNC. Transferred to Texas State last year, redshirted, never made an appearance. I think everybody else you guys are probably aware of at this point in terms of the recent moves. Jamari Persons at Liberty, Lewis Brown, Baylor, Justice Ross Simmons is still at Syracuse. If you want to go back a couple of years, Jordan Williams went to Sac State, as did Damian Henderson. Kind of crazy when you recognize that 2 of the 5, I believe, highest rated high school recruits in program history signed in the last couple of cycles in Mekhi Fox and Damian Henderson. And they'll be playing their college ball this fall for Eastern Michigan, and Sacramento State, respectively. I don't say that to put those guys down. It didn't work out for whatever reason. There's always a million different things that could factor into whether it works out for a player at a school or not. Had really high hopes for them, so I'm still rooting for them to figure it out at their next stops. But I do think it's just an important reminder that recruiting rankings, although helpful and great for content, have to be taken with a grain of salt. The fact of the matter is that the majority of the record-setting players in program history were not highly touted 5-star prospects or anything like that. That's not to say that there's no value in any of that. I'm not trying to be completely dismissive. Really, based on how it's been explained to me, those whole rankings are kind of trying to evaluate people's athletic traits and how they're going to translate, to the NFL level, which to me, that's a highly subjective process, particularly when you're trying to project it from them being 16, 17, 18 years old. You haven't even, matured physically to that point. Obviously, there are some guys that you can just tell, the Christian McCaffreys of the world, the Derrick Henrys of the world, you watch their high school film, there was no doubt. But there's a whole lot of examples of guys who looked like bona fide all-stars out there at the high school level. They get to the collegiate ranks and it just doesn't work out. And that's unfortunately been pretty commonly the way things have gone for CSU when they've signed some of those really highly touted guys. I do have some high hopes for some of the guys that are in the program right now, Jordan Ross being one of them. Again, this isn't to say, recruiting rankings are completely full of shit or anything like that. I think there's some weird stuff that happens with some of the rankings, particularly with guys who end up, being a 4-star, 5-star, whatever. You commit to a G5, all of a sudden your ranking drops, or vice versa. Like the quarterback that was committed to Boise State all of a sudden becomes a 5-star prospect when he flips from Boise to Oregon. What's changed other than the glitz and the glamour? But I just wanted to give a brief update on where some of those guys are at now. A couple other names, if you're curious, Grady Kelly will be at Michigan State. He spent the 2024 season at Florida State, went back home, unfortunately. Didn't really work out for him there. Got a little bit of playing time in a reserve role. Certainly would have been a much bigger contributor had he stayed at CSU. Clay Millen is still listed on the Florida roster, and Jackson Stratton is still listed on the Iowa roster. Just kind of a brief update on where some of those former Rams are. In terms of the guys that I feel like are still playing college football that started their career at CSU that I wish were on the 2025 roster, Tanner Arkins, probably number one. Didn't look like a natural fit in 2022. Then based on the offense CSU rolled out the last couple of years, I think he actually would have been a very nice fit in a more pro style West Coast influenced offense than the air raid. But he's had a really nice career at Illinois since leaving. I mean, any of the receivers would be nice. Justice Ross Simmons, Lewis Brown, not on the team for non-football reasons, but either of those guys would be helpful. Grady Kelly, having him in the interior defensive line would be nice. But when you look across the board, I don't feel like there are a lot of names that you would cry over or anything like that. And I say that respectfully. Again, I'm not trying to put any of these guys down because they left, but just a brief update on where some of the former Rams are today. It's hard to keep up with in the modern college football world, particularly when guys start transferring multiple times, like Grady Kelly, who's at Florida State, he's at Michigan State, and some of these other guys. But let's just get into it. Let's get into the topic that I'm sure some of the folks in the Toyota chat are waiting for. If you're watching live, I'd appreciate it if you give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Throw your questions, comments, etc. my way. I'll get to as many as I can. If I don't get to them right away, we can always come back at the end of the show. But I wanted to talk about whether CSU should claim a national championship for going undefeated in 1915. If you missed it, it's a big storyline this morning that's circulating. Auburn is now claiming national titles for the 1910, 1914, 1958, and 2004 seasons. I'm not going to lie. When I saw this, initially I scoffed. I rolled my eyes. I made a post on Twitter about how it was corny. Immediately ruffled the feathers of some Auburn fans. A little bit surprising. I wasn't 100% sure if they knew how to read or not. But I just feel like trying to claim a national championship for 2004 is so egregious. Pre-BCS is one thing. There wasn't a national standard. It kind of became tradition that the number one team in the AP poll and the number one team in the coaches poll would be nationally recognized as your national champions. But sometimes there was some discrepancy there, and sometimes it wasn't unanimous, and especially the further back that you go, I'm talking pre-1930s and stuff like that. It's really kind of a crapshoot, and there are a lot of instances of teams who claim they were the national champion for that year. This isn't the first time this topic has come up. I remember when UCF claimed their national title after not getting into the playoff. It was something CSU fans brought up back then. Hey, should we rep the 1915 team that went undefeated based on certain metrics? Going back, looking at it retroactively, they were certainly one of the more dominant teams in college football that season. From what I've been able to gather, Cornell is the champion listed officially through the NCAA, but Oklahoma went 10-0 that year. Cornell was 9-0. Minnesota went 6-1. Pittsburgh went 8-0. There are a lot of teams from that time frame who have been claimed champs or claimed to be the national champions themselves. CSU that season, they went 7-0 as well under Harry Hughes. That, of course, was still when the school was recognized as Colorado A&M. But they were dominant, and I mean truly dominant. Started the season with a couple of road wins over CU and Utah. Always nice, but they outscored the opposition in those 7 games 244-31. Averaged 35 points a game in 1915. That's saying something. Only allowed 4.42 points per game. They kicked everybody's ass every single week. And frankly, their claim to a national championship, if CSU were to go that route, is as valid as anybody else's from the time period. Again, it was just an imperfect process. I think in particular, the inability to see a lot of these teams that were playing, so much of this was East Coast dominated because that's where the media hub was. I mean, they weren't watching the RMAC in 1915. I feel a little bit hypocritical coming up and claiming that CSU would be in the right in doing this, given that my general position in 2025 is that if you hadn't already claimed that national championship, to me, kind of feels like you missed the boat. I don't think they would be wrong in doing so. Again, I think their claim to a title that year is just as valid as anybody else's. It just feels, I don't know. There's a great stand-up bit that talks about how, I think what the Mormons kind of deal with largely when it comes to people mocking them has to do with the fact that their religion is newer. It's not old, and like that's just kind of how I feel. Like trying to claim the national titles at this point, I don't know. It feels like you missed the boat. I would be fine with recognizing the tradition. I would be happy that CSU would be able to say that, I guess, at that point. Again, like it would be no less invalid than anybody else's from that time frame. It just feels a little bit corny to pat yourself on the back, and that's what I said about UCF, in 2017 or whatever it was. It's certainly what I'm saying with Auburn in 2004. If you want to claim pre-BCS era titles, go ahead. You have every right to do so because, again, it was imperfect, and there's a lot of discrepancy about who the actual champion is. Trying to claim 2004, like we didn't all watch that season. Like we didn't watch, Lendell White and Reggie Bush and all of them just thump Oklahoma. I think that one was still Carson Palmer, I believe. Matt Leinart was the following year where they played Texas in the Rose Bowl. But I mean, those USC teams were as dominant as any college football teams have ever been, to now try and retroactively claim you're the champion because USC got into some stuff that frankly today is just allowed. You're allowed to pay the players. It feels a little silly at this point to act all high and mighty about what USC was doing in 2004. It was against the rules. I get it, but let's not have our heads in the sand here and act like it wasn't going on across the country. Do we think Texas wasn't also playing wasn't also paying their players? That's cute. Got a little tongue tied there, kind of killed the delivery. CD Stick says, I say, why not? Nothing is real in college football anymore. Just claim it. What possible argument could someone use to refute it? Logically, there's not much I think you could argue against it, which is kind of why I'm saying CSU would be valid in doing so if they wanted to. If I was the athletic director, I would be a little bit hesitant just because of my own personal beliefs on all of this. But again, I think you have some validity in what you're saying here in the Toyota chat, and that it's all kind of made up anyways. Why not? Why not say you were a national champion, hang the banner, put it up in Canvas Stadium? It's really only going to come up in debates with folks like us, the sickos who live and breathe this stuff. But it's an interesting concept, and it'd be one I would love to get John Weber's perspective on. I think that the main thing is you just don't want to get mocked for it. But I mean, UCF did it. Auburn's doing it now. Why not? Nothing else. You're going to piss off the CU fans, as CD Stick says. I would certainly be a troll. Like I'm not even going to lie. If they were to claim that they were national champions, immediately I would start making jokes about how CSU now has a full national championship and CU only has half of one because they had to split with Georgia Tech and all that. It would be hilarious just from a content making perspective to know the type of mileage that I would get out of it. I don't know. I guess my main takeaway here with all of this is while the college football playoff is flawed, incredibly flawed even, it is way better than having it all be this ambiguous of an interpretation of who the national champion is. The further we get away from the BCS era, the more I kind of appreciate what it was, because I do think it did a pretty good job most years of validating the national champion by genuinely getting the best two teams. I think that's up for debate. You play it out on the field, so like I have no problem obviously with the playoff or anything like that. I just think the more and more we expand it, while potential access is great for schools like CSU and some of these other Pac-12 programs, I don't know if you could say with a straight face on any given year there are truly more than 4 teams that deserve to play for a national championship. It's it's all up for debate though, and that's what makes all this fun, is that all of this gives us something to talk about in August as we eagerly await the week 0 slate. Again, keep your comments rolling here. Nick in the Toyota chat says 1915 national championship is better than a fifth down championship. I'm gonna get some troll responses from this, but we've already started the day with that kind of energy. I leaned into my Bama fandom a little bit, going at it with the Auburn fans. So I guess we just want the smoke this afternoon, and then we'll lean into that kind of vibe. Let's take a quick breather. Let's shout out a couple of our awesome partners. We're going to keep this show rolling. Again, we've got a ton to get into today. First Mountain West Power Ranking of the fall. I'm going to rank the CSU quarterback, or the quarterbacks that CSU will face this season, just in terms of how challenging I think it will be to overcome them. But let's shout out those partners, and we'll keep this rolling. Coors Light encourages you to never lose your chill. Life is going to test you. You're going to deal with idiots on the internet who don't know what they're talking about and love to tweet dumb stuff at you. But when has getting worked up ever solved anything? I know that when I do, ultimately, it just means they won. Sometimes it makes me feel a little bit better about the situation, even while recognizing the immaturity of it all. But I guess that's the internet era in a nutshell. But the point here is life is going to test you, and it's all about how you deal with it. I've learned that doing little things like doing a little bit of yard work, getting exercise, it can go a long way in how I am able to deal with the stress and chaos that life throws my way. When I'm kicked back, when I'm chilling, when I got college football on, when I'm in that right state of mind, that's when I lean into it. I crack open an ice cold Coors Light. When the mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. Coors Light is cold. Oh my goodness. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smooth finish. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill and choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. I also want to talk to you guys about Cake Mortgage. Cake is, of course, the business owner's home mortgage partner. They specialize in non-QM loans. If you're a regular employee of a company, you get a W-2, your income shows on your tax return. Traditional lenders, they love this because it's simple. It can get kind of complicated if you're a business owner, if you're an independent contractor, something like that. Business owners can reduce their taxable income, keep more money in the business, but it means their tax return shows little income. Most lenders, they don't understand this type of complex income. So then they deny you for home loans and refinancing and stuff like that. Head to the link in the description to get started. It's great for creative professionals, contractors, tech entrepreneurs, anybody who kills their own meat. Cake Mortgage Corporation, equal housing lender, NMLS number 1734623, licensed in Colorado by the Division of Real Estate. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, that's kind of a fun little way to start the show there. Maybe we can clip that on social media, and we'll see what kind of engagement we can get out of it. I don't know. The more I talk it through, I do feel like CSU would be justified in doing so if they wanted to claim that 1915 national championship. I have some respect, honestly, that they maybe haven't and haven't patted themselves on the back, if you will. But I guess if it's all open for interpretation anyways, and nobody else is going to do it, you're going to have to give yourself that respect, I guess. So the more I do this, the more I'm coming along to the idea of maybe it would be a good idea and it would be fun to do it just to be able to say you've won a natty, I guess. Josh says Auburn is pulling this, and they have different coaches calling plays on each down. That Auburn, and if you are new to the show here, if you're within the last year, I haven't talked about it probably quite as much in the last couple of years as I did in the past, but I do root for Alabama football in the SEC. Admittedly, my passion maybe not quite as strong in the post-Saban era. He's the reason I rooted for them in the first place. Him and the NCAA football game playing with Sean Alexander back in the day. But there's just something about the Auburn fan base that gets under my skin, man. They're just something else, man. And it's one of the worst gigs in the country because their fans have these crazy expectations that Bama should be, or that they should be up there with Bama, that they should be up there with Florida and Georgia, and they just aren't. They just aren't on that level. But again, the expectations are that, and it is just a tough place to to satisfy anyone. But it's kind of fun to see my two major, sects of college fandom kind of intersecting here in this random summer topic. But Joey in the Toyota chat says, "No hat, Justin. This is new breaking news. It has been a while since I've done a show without a hat. But remember, shout out to the homies at Branded Bills, who we will shout out later. Really appreciate them for hooking me up before the season here, and I'll be rocking them all throughout the 2025 season. Let's get into the 2025 season. Let's stop talking about all these hypotheticals and what if this and what if that. Let's just get into it. Let's rank the quarterbacks that CSU will face this season from 12 through 1. I'm going to start at the top. I know there's less suspense there, but we'll go 12 through 1 when we do the power ranking. I struggled on this because there's not a ton of continuity when you look at the schedule that CSU plays this year. I mean, it's basically Madsen with Boise, Owen McCown with UTSA, and then a couple of other guys who maybe started a small handful of games. But when it comes to returning week 1 starters in 2025 from 2024, it's McCown and Madsen. That's it. I like that for CSU. I like that you're not facing a ton of guys that have been in the same system for multiple years and all that. A couple of guys that have played a lot of college football, but I do think you have to factor in just the element of transferring and new offensive coordinators and everything that goes into all that. But without further ado, let's just get into it. Let's start at 1. I'm going Damon Williams Jr., the Washington quarterback, and this is really it's kind of what I saw from an eye test standpoint. I think he's the most athletic and dynamic quarterback that CSU is going to have to go up against. He's got a great arm. He's a guy that does a great job of extending the play and using his legs. He's a productive runner as well, 282 rushing yards and a couple of scores last season. He went 82 of 105 for 944 yards, 8 touchdowns and 1 interception. Primarily came in as the number 2 QB when things were out of hand. Washington was not great last year, but he was awesome in the bowl game, had a 4 touchdown performance. And again, just physically, watching him and some of the plays he made, mostly in that bowl game, which you do have to kind of take bowl results with a grain of salt, but he pops in a way that some of these other guys just don't. I think it's got to be him. And I think that week 1 matchup is definitely the most amount of talent that the Rams are going to play on paper this year. Keeping it rolling at number 2, I've got Maddox Madsen of Boise State. I go back and forth because I've said so many times that from a throwing the football standpoint, just physically, I think he's fairly pedestrian. Like he runs that system so well. He's incredibly intelligent, and to give him more credit than I probably have over the years, I thought he played really well down the second half of the season last year. Obviously, that offense was designed around Ashton Gianti, and he is the reason they made the CFP. It was not because of Maddox Madsen. It was Ashton Gianti carrying them week after week. But I did feel like some of the throws he was able to make down the field as the season went on, he showed a little bit more arm talent than I gave him credit for. He's also probably a better athlete than I generally recognize. I mean, 221 rush yards this past season, 5 touchdowns on the ground. It helps when you have the best running back in the country and you can, do little bootlegs off of it and play action and stuff like that. But he's a guy that does a nice job of extending the play as well. Really poised, really polished, makes good decisions with the football. I think that the toughest part about Madsen is just his experience, and he does have some continuity on the offensive side of the ball. We'll talk about that. I think Boise returns like 17, 18 starters. He was strong as the season went on, and I do think he played well in the CFP, made some good throws. And while, again, I have a hard time pounding the table, being like he's a beast or anything like that, I don't think he's the best quarterback in the Mountain West. I did vote for him to be preseason offensive player of the year because I think he's earned that. When you're the returning leader in passing yards and passing touchdowns from a season ago, and you went to the college football playoff, I think you earn that right of being the preseason offensive player of the year. And again, I think he's a really solid quarterback. But to me, it kind of is like the Nick Stevens, Garrett Grayson debate. Nick Stevens statistically had a phenomenal career. And he's another guy who, if you pinpoint certain stretches, like was even better than people give him credit for. And I think some CSU fans were harsher on him in the moment than he deserved. But what I mean here is that statistically speaking, Nick Stevens is the most accomplished quarterback in CSU history, passing yards, passing touchdowns, all of that. A lot of it has to do with longevity. But I don't think anybody who's watched CSU for the last 40 years would say that he's the best CSU quarterback they've ever seen. And to me, that's kind of Madsen. Like, Madsen is solid. You would take him, certainly. But physically, there's just a little that's left to be desired, I would say. I mean, again, like, I'm being pretty harsh, I think, and I still am ranking him number 2 on this list, which kind of speaks to what I view as a favorable schedule for CSU in terms of the quarterback competition that they're facing this year. I don't think it's anything like what they had to go up against last year. But I've got Williams 1, I've got Madsen 2, and I just want to point out that Madsen probably deserves more credit than I give him. But I just can't do it. I can't buy into it because I think there are guys in this league that are far more gifted physically. And I think CSU's quarterback is an example of that. But he's not the only one. I mean, I'm high on the kid out of Hawaii. I think EJ Warner throws a nice ball. He's kind of an arena quarterback. Like, I'm throwing it up there. Hopefully my guy's going to make a play. But keeping it rolling here at number 3, I'm going Owen McCown of UTSA, former CU quarterback, transferred to UTSA, has been the starter the last couple of years. Coming off of a really nice season, threw for just shy of 3,500 yards on 63% completion. That's awesome. 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Those are numbers you can win with. Those are numbers you can be competitive with. Also had 340 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns, which was surprising to me. I mean, I would say the UTSA, games that I've watched online, it wasn't an element that like consistently stood out to me, but it does, demonstrate the ability to run the ball a little bit. When you look at his game logs, it is kind of feast or famine. Kind of going to put up monster numbers, throw for 400 yards and 3-4 touchdowns, or it's, a couple of games they had in September last year against like Texas State and Texas. I think they had to go on the road and play both of them, where he threw for like 100 yards, no touchdowns, didn't turn the ball over a ton, but he has been a feast or famine type quarterback throughout his career. He's also been significantly better in Alamo Dome at home. I think he has been out on the road, but I don't know if that's fair to pinpoint that specifically on him, because that's kind of just UTSA in a nutshell. I believe they went winless on the road last year. Maybe they had 1 win. The point is they're way better in San Antonio than they are on the road. But he's a quarterback whose arm talent you have to respect, and that's a UTSA team. I've talked about it a lot, but to me, UTSA and Washington State, assuming, you lose to Washington, assuming you beat UNC, like, those 2 games really are going to dictate the direction of this season. And if you can just get those under your belt, the conference slate starts really favorable for CSU. I like it a lot. But again, you got to have some success. And if Owen McCown has anything to say about it, it's going to be a tough matchup for the Rams. Let's shout out our other partners real quick before I finish this list. We've still got 9 more to go, but once I start to rambling, I'll end up missing my cue here. So let's shout out those partners. We'll keep this rolling. Keep the questions and comments rolling. I appreciate everybody rocking with us live on YouTube this morning. Say good morning to our awesome producer, Dion, in the Toyota chat. But let's keep this rolling. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you're looking for some gear to make your brand stand apart from the crowd, Branded Bills has you covered with the best custom headwear. Start your order, and their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel that you need. I know we're getting some sweet ALLCITY Branded Bills hats. I've got a couple of CSU hats here back on the set. They've got an awesome partnership with CSU. I highly recommend you check out their on-campus collection. I love that they've got a gold option. That's pretty rare to find a CSU gold hat. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. You know the moment, the one you realize you left your favorite sunglasses at the beach or on the roof of the car or at the hotel you were on vacation in, and now you're at a gas station 3 states away, and they're nothing but a dream. You'll never see them again. I've been there. It's the absolute worst. I had a pair of frog skins I got from my dad back in the day that I lost for a couple years. I actually found them, thank God, but it was devastating. It sucks when you lose your sunglasses. Shady Rays, they're trying to make that process a little less stressful. They're game changers. They've got lost and broken replacements for any pair of Shady Rays. If you do what I just said, if you leave them in a hotel, across the country, if you step on them, if you break them, they'll send you a brand new pair. No guilt trip, just replacements. Now I actually wear my sunglasses confidently because I'm not worried about it. We've teamed up with Shady Rays to bring you an exclusive offer. Head to shadyrays.com, use that code DNVR for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. I know we've had a couple of people sent in that they took advantage of that deal, but I mean, 35% off polarized shades is legit. Use that code DNVR. Shout out to our homies at Shady Rays. Shout out to everybody in Ram Nation. All right, and number 4 on the ranking of toughness of QB CSU will be playing this year. I went Michael Alejado, the young kid out of Hawaii, completed 70% of his passes in the 4 games he played last year. I actually felt like the offense was more consistently on schedule when he was back there than when Shager was back there, who's got a ton of arm talent himself. Didn't really work out how they were envisioning last year, but I think Timmy Chang finally has his QB, and I think getting him that experience early on in his career is huge. Now he gets to come back. Technically, I think should have 4 seasons of eligibility remaining because he only played in 4 games last year, but threw for 585 yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's not the biggest guy. I mean, he's only listed at like 5'10", 180, but he throws a really nice ball, and he displayed some great decision making. It helps that they have the best wide receiver core in the conference. It helps that he's in a system that's going to allow him to get in a rhythm and is conducive to putting up big passing numbers. The run and shoot. It's a fun system to play in. If you're a QB, you get to play up tempo, sling the ball all over the field. But I think Timmy Chang's got something there, and I'm quietly, buying some Hawaii stock this season. Everybody's really high on UNLV and Fresno and San Jose State and some of these other teams. San Jose State, I get it just because their schedule is such a cakewalk, but I'm higher on teams like Hawaii and Air Force and even CSU and Wyoming than maybe the consensus seemed to be. We'll get into that when we do the power ranking. At number 5, this is where I think it really gets up for debate. I think those top 4 I feel pretty strongly about. It's tough with a couple of these schools because we're not 100% who the starting QB is going to be. Some of these races are still TBD, and multiple guys are going to get an opportunity to play. I think that's the case with UNLV, with Air Force. I think there's a possibility multiple guys are going to play. And number 5, I went EJ Warner of Fresno State. Spent 2 years at Temple before transferring to Rice. He's technically going to be a 4th-year starting quarterback at the FBS level, but with his 3rd different school, he's a guy who loves to sling it. I joked earlier he feels like an arena league quarterback, maybe also kind of like Jake Plummer back in the day. He had a great quote. I think, Plummer, I don't remember what the number was, but whatever it was, he threw 225 touchdowns and threw 225 interceptions. It was exactly the same. And he is a guy who is not even a little bit apologetic about it. He's like, yeah, sometimes you turn the ball over, but I'm going to give my guy a chance. That seems to be the EJ Warner mentality. 58 touchdowns, 37 interceptions in his career, thrown for just shy of 9,000 yards. Hasn't had a ton of help around him in terms of the skill positions, playing at Temple. I think he did overlap with Dante Wright for a year or 2. Rice is more of an academics type school. I'm interested to see if being in a system that I assume will be a little bit more run heavy will allow him to limit the turnovers a little bit. I will say one of the things that's alarming to me about him when you go back and look through his game logs last year, he's at that point, you're a junior quarterback. In the second half of the season, he had not 1, but 2 different 3 interception games. And that, whether you've got, talent around you or not, whether you're put in a position where you have to throw the ball all over the field like he has been. Again, I do think having any semblance of a running game would be huge for him. So you're not asking him to throw the ball 45, 50 times a game, because if you do that, you are going to have some turnovers. And I think you need to, factor all of that in these types of evaluations. But he's less dynamic athletically than the other guys we've seen. He throws a nice football. They could stretch the field a little bit. But to me, there's a pretty significant drop off here once you start getting into this tier of quarterback. At number 6, I think both guys are going to play. I'm going to say, for the sake of the graphic, we'll put Anthony Calandria at UNLV. Alex Orji from Michigan also transferred there. A couple of different Michigan transfers in the league this year who are phenomenal athletes, but there are great questions about whether they're capable of completing forward passes with any form of consistency or not. Look, Orji is one of probably just pound for pound raw athleticism, one of the best pure athletes in the entire league. Dude's built like a brick shithouse. I mean, he's nothing but muscle, runs the ball well. That's why they tried to make it work at Michigan, but he's just so limited as a passer that I have a hard time seeing Dan Mullen lean into that in a full-time capacity. I'm going to say Calandria wins the job. He's nothing special, really, from what I've seen. Admittedly, I didn't watch a ton of Virginia football these past couple of years. 26 touchdowns, 20 interceptions over the last 2 years, but just kind of, casually going through and watching some stuff I can find of him on YouTube. He's fine. I think he'll be able to get the job done, but I've just got so many questions about UNLV. I think it's really surprising how so many people are just penciling them in as, the clear-cut number 2 team in the league, or in some cases even the front runner, because you've got one returning starter and you're changing systems on both sides of the ball. Like, that is a massive assumption that they're just going to be able to hit the ground running. And number 7, Caden Anderson of Wyoming. And honestly, I almost put him as high as 5. I believe in this kid. I think Wyoming has their quarterback, and I think it's going to be a good situation with him. They've got some nice talent at receiver, better at least than they've had the last couple of years. I think Gillenborg is a stud at tight end, the best in the conference. But Caden's a good athlete. He throws a nice ball. He did admittedly drop a spot on my list because he threw up the Shadur in Canvas Stadium while Wyoming was down multiple scores. That was Fatone, Bauta, energy, very, very dorky. You've got to have better self-awareness as QB1 than that. You got to recognize we're kind of getting spanked in this rivalry game. Maybe we don't do what Fatone Bauta did. And God, what was that? The 2015 or 2016 showdown where they're down by like 40 points and he's out here like, oh, first down. And one of the most embarrassing CSU moments in the history of that rivalry. Caden Anderson, very much on that vibe in the showdown last year, but it wasn't his fault. I mean, the receivers were so bad in that game. I legitimately ended the game with 4 straight drops. I'd never seen anything like it. But you go and you watch, what he did in that New Mexico game, and even how he competed, in some of those late season games after Wyoming really had nothing to play for. They weren't going to be bowl eligible. They'd already lost the showdown. I like what he can do. He needs to bring his completion percentage up. Only completed about 58% of his passes last year, but also wasn't the full-time starter until the end. 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a couple of rushing TDs as well. But I'm buying some of that Caden Anderson and the Wyoming offense stock to be significantly improved from what we saw a year ago. I don't think they're contenders or anything like that, but I do think they're going to be in the mix to be a bowl team. Number 8, another instance where we're not 100% sure he's going to be the starter. From everything I've read, there are 5 different guys in the mix at Wazoo, but Zevi Eckhouse seems to be the front runner. He's one of the returners on the Washington State roster. More of a traditional pocket passer, and I am interested to see how that works out under Jimmy Rogers, because basically everything we had seen from him at South Dakota State featured more of the dual threat type guy. From what I've read, Eckhouse has tried to implement some of that into his game. He's all right. Again, like this bottom tier here is even another drop off. I said the top 4 are kind of in their own tier. Then I'd put 4 through 7, all kind of in the same tier. Like you could really, depending on the week, probably argue any of those guys, and it would be pretty fair take. I think the same goes for 8 through 12. This is just kind of a pick your preference type situation. We'll see. He throws a nice ball based on what I've seen, but also I'm not sure schematically if it's going to be the best fit for him or not. And there's certainly a possibility that it's somebody completely different under center by the time, CSU and Wazoo play this September. Number 9, I'm going Jaden Denegal, San Diego State, recently named their starting quarterback for week 1. He's a great athlete. Can he throw the ball consistently? If that's a question mark, I don't think you can be a top, QB in the half of the league, but he's got a great system. I do think he's got a good, coach and all that. I'm sure San Diego State is always going to be able to land good athletes. They've got a great defense too, which helps. He's not going to be asked to be Superman out there. But what does it look like? They had to, replace their quarterback with, what was his name? O'Brien or O'Neill. I think going to Wisconsin, you lose 1,000-yard rusher in the backfield. It just feels like for 20 years, we've been sitting here asking, why can't San Diego State find any consistency at the quarterback position, especially when you factor in the amount of talent that comes out of the Southern California region. It really makes no sense to me. Like it should be such an easy place to recruit to. There's, beautiful women, the beach, all of that. And for whatever reason, they've had all these stud running backs. They've even had some athleticism at receiver, but they've just never been able to put it together. And that's why I thought Sean Lewis was such a smart hire for them, because I would think that would be a system that talented quarterbacks and receivers would want an opportunity to play in. Maybe Denegal will be his redemption project. And, at the end of the year, I'll be sitting here being like, I should have given this guy a lot more credit, because I do think he's got a good coach. And I do think, they'll put him in a spot where they lean on his legs and it's a lot of play action and design QB runs. But if he can just make a couple of throws with consistency, that's going to so greatly elevate San Diego State's ceiling. But it feels TBD to me. Ferentz Jr. being the tight end coach for Fresno is kind of funny. I didn't see that in the Toyota chat. That is funny. We also have from Josh, can we get a GoFundMe to get RG3 to call our game against UNLV? Get him to call game with Alex Orgy again. That'd be hilarious. Number 10, Jack Lane, New Mexico, Idaho transfer, followed Eck over there. 14 touchdowns, 4 interceptions at Idaho. I don't believe he went into last season as the full-time starter, but took the job either for poor play from the old guy or injury. Did play well in the playoff, went back and watched some of that, made good decisions with the football. I just have so many question marks about New Mexico trying to get that many pieces to come together, because we've been in that spot, at CSU in 2022. It's not easy when you're basically trying to replace your entire team. It's just a really tough spot. But he throws a nice ball. Like, New Mexico is probably the biggest wild card in the league to me. I could see a world in which they're way more competitive than people anticipate, just because they've got a strong run game and they're explosive, and maybe they pull out a couple of shootouts, kind of like they did last year. But defensively, who knows? And what are they like in the trenches? And I just have a lot of questions about how it's going to come together. And I just need a bigger sample size from him. I think, again, though, 8 through 12 here are all very plug and play. And I think you could make a fair case for most of them, or 8 through 11, at least 12, I'm gonna say is correct. But number 11, we'll say Josh Johnson ends up getting the starting gig at Air Force. We'll see. The kid that they found some success with last year ended up portaling, but now I don't think he's going to be eligible. So that's this really wonky decision. But honestly, Air Force and my confidence in them really doesn't matter with the QB. It's all about what are they going to be like in the trenches, and how much continuity do they have specifically. And they're in a good spot, and they came on strong as the season ended last year. I'm very high on Air Force compared to the consensus. Finally, at number 12, and he's not guaranteed to start either based on what I've heard. It's kind of been a revolving door under center the last couple of years at UNC, but we'll say Pete Castelli. Can you just start my guy, Caden Box, already, UNC? I don't know what you're doing. By some grace of God, you managed to land a kid locally who throws a nice football. Kid I actually kind of wanted CSU to take a look at. And you just keep trying to shoehorn these dual threats, and it hasn't worked. Like, it just has not worked. You've been a disaster offensively for multiple years. Feels like they just can't get out of their own way. You're limited with skill position talent and all that kind of stuff. But shout out Caden Box. Start the Colorado kid. That's what we're advocating for here on the DNVR Rams podcast. That's it, though. That's my 1 through 12 in terms of the toughest quarterback CSU will have to get through this year, especially when you put it all out on paper like that. It feels very manageable to me. And I know that I came in with pretty ambitious projections, and I have tried to make it clear now that those predictions, 25 predictions, one, we had to stretch it a little bit thin to get to 25, and two, they are rooted in optimism. I think anything from I mean, probably like 5-7 to 10-2 is fairly fair. Like you could make a plausible projection and lay it all out. And this is why if this happens. But I think at minimum, this has got to be a bowl team. I think you've got to win 7 games because you've got 7 home games. And I've said a couple times now that I just think the talent and athleticism is going to make the difference, along with the experience and having a third-year starting quarterback. I just like CSU's potential to pull out some of these games. And kind of with that in mind, let me take a quick sip of water here, give a chance for production to take a breath as well. And then we'll get into our first Mountain West Power Ranking of 2025. I love doing this. We've done it every week now for a couple of years. It always pisses people off online, and it's a fun little way to talk about the rest of the league. All right. A couple of things I want to add here for context, and I'm going to have to make sure that I don't drag on here because we've only got 15 minutes left, and this very easily could have been 45 minutes of the show if I went into every little detail. But things that I emphasized in this preseason power ranking, because we haven't seen any of these teams play, and in the portal era it's never been more challenging to have an accurate outlook on teams, because there's just so many moving pieces. And outside of being there every day and then seeing the guys in practice and having that opportunity, it's just you're kind of trusting what you read and what you hear, and it's tough. It's why I think probably having a preseason top 25 is useless at this point. Like, let's just wait till after week 1. But I value roster retention. How many starters are you returning? Staff continuity, I think, is a major asset for teams. And then having a returning starting quarterback, again, I think that's one of the greatest arguments for CSU and believing in them, is that it's just not very common to have a third-year starter, especially somebody who does have legitimate arm talent like Braden does. And there are 8 million things we need to see from him this year. We've talked about it. Still has kind of only scratched the surface, I think, of the type of quarterback that he can be. But physically, the tools are there. The pieces are in place around him. I like the Rams' chance of being a legit contender in the Mountain West this year. That's why I picked them to finish second in the league. That's why I have them second on the power ranking going into the season. The big question mark right now, how does the defense hold up? How does the O-line hold up as well? You're losing 3 starters from last year. Been a little bit of movement, in the interior over the last couple of weeks. So I am kind of just curious how that's all going to play out in the end. If the defense is a disaster, if you can't block anybody, that's going to greatly impact my projection. And obviously they're not going to live up to that 9-win prediction that I put out there. But I've got Boise 1 and I've got CSU 2. They're the teams that I feel like return the most consistent contributors from their last couple of years. They've got the 2 best quarterbacks in the conference. Boise, 17 returning starters, preseason player of the year, clear-cut favorite. They've got to be number 1. They are number 1 until somebody knocks them off. I've made the argument over the years that the gap between them and everybody else is not quite as drastic as it used to be, and I certainly feel that going into this year. But they've got a really talented backfield. They've got a great offensive line. Still going to be pretty solid defensively, even after losing Hassani and some of those guys. Also, I hope he's doing okay. So I suffered a significant injury in the preseason, which you hate to see. But to me, Boise's 1. Tough to even argue it. CSU, I think you've got to put 2, though. At least I do, if I'm going to pick them to make the Mountain West Championship game like I did in the preseason poll. I have San Jose State 3rd, although I am a little bit skeptical of all the hype that they're getting. They do return 13 starters, though, and there's a decent amount of continuity offensively. They kind of did the weird 2 QB system at times last year with Walker Eagett and Emmett Brown, and it was weird. I didn't quite understand what they were doing, but Eagett kind of took the job as the year went on, throws a nice deep ball. They're going to spread it all around and not run and shoot offense that they've been running under Ken Niumatalolo. I think they're going to be right there in the mix. I think their schedule is going to benefit them. It wouldn't surprise me if they are very consistently in the top 4 of the power ranking all year long. But I don't know if we're ever going to truly consider them a contender, if that makes sense. Number 4, I'm going Air Force. They closed the season with 4 straight wins, 14 returning starters. They've got continuity offensively, not under center, but 8 returning starters. And really all that matters is, are they going to be able to run the ball, and what's happening in in the trenches, and the years where they return multiple starting offensive linemen tend to be the years where, they win 8+ games and are right there in the mix for a conference championship. I've got so much respect for Troy Calhoun and what he does in that program. I'm just always going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'll be holding on to my Calhoun stock, long after it's probably expired and the game's passed him over. But again, that's just a testament to how good of a coach I really feel like he is. I think he's one of the most underrated coaches, not just in college football, but in football, period. What they're able to do on a year-to-year basis is incredible considering the restraints. Number 5, this is probably where we piss off the UNLV fans if we haven't already, because they're going to want to be 2. I'm not even putting them in the top 5. I've got Hawaii. They returned 18 starters. I love what they've got building offensively. Their receiving core is elite. 2 guys, out of the 3 preseason first-team all-conference selection were Hawaii wide receivers. Obviously, it's going to be dependent on their young quarterback really being a playmaker and putting them in a position. They're going to have to find some success on the road, which has kind of been it's been the hurdle that they have not been able to overcome under Chang to this point. Saying that type of stuff always makes me cautious and nervous as a CSU guy, because I'm like, how fitting would it be if they figured it out by winning in Fort Collins? That would be both peak Ram life and just kind of peak Timmy Chang experience. It's been a roller coaster, but I think he's the man for the job there. Like, if he can't find success, I have a hard time seeing anybody else in the modern era be able to do a better job, just given the local connects that he has, given that they're going to be patient with him. I mean, the truth is a lot of guys in his spot probably would be in hotter water, coming off a back-to-back 5-win seasons where you really had a strong chance to make a bowl and kind of shot yourself in the foot. But I also think people got to I also think that the locals recognize how much of a disaster it was, post-Graham there. Not too dissimilar from the situation, Norvell inherited post-Adazio. They were just not in a place where they were even remotely competitive. Number 6, that's where we're putting UNLV. Look, if at the end of the year, all of that talent pops, I will gladly, or not gladly, but I will come up on this show and I'll take my medicine. I will admit that I was wrong. I refuse to just pencil them into a top 3 spot in the league because they had a nice little stretch here over the last 2 years that frankly is completely unprecedented and such a significant outlier from what that program has historically been. I think they've invested. They did a good job of trying to capitalize on the moment and not letting this just completely fall apart after losing Barry Odom to Purdue. I was bummed to see him leave because I didn't feel like it was a great gig. That's a whole different rant. But I just think all these people that are penciling them in because they signed a bunch of power forward drop downs. Well, there's a reason these guys are transferring. To be fair, it didn't work out. Not all of them are problematic necessarily, but again, like if they were studs, if they were murdering it at their old schools, they wouldn't be transferring from the power forward to UNLV. Maybe if they were at UNLV killing it, they'd transfer the other way. But I don't know. I just think there are a lot of people that are really giving them the benefit of the doubt. And I look at the history and I say, why? Why should I just assume that this 2-year period was not a fluke, that it wasn't an outlier? Because everything about the history of that program, when you look at the last 50 years, says that a regression to the mean is probably more likely. And again, like I think they're going to be good. I don't think they're going to be a disaster. I think they should be a bowl team. But to me, and this is just where I'm at in the preseason, I feel like they are more likely to be, a 6-7 win team than an 8, 9, 10, than a team that wins 8, 9, 10 games, something like that. We'll see. I mean, they surprised me last year with a couple of those Big 12 wins, but replacing 21 starters is a really tough thing to do. Number 7, I'm going Fresno State. They've got 9 returners. I don't know if their top-end talent is quite on par with UNLV or Hawaii, but I do think they're going to be competitive. I think they're going to run the ball. I think they made a great coaching hire. I just wonder, they've lost so many guys at the skill positions the last couple of years. You've got a quarterback who's kind of erratic with the football. Are they going to be consistent enough offensively? That's the big question for me. And then at number 8, San Diego State, veteran defense. How's the offense look? What type of production are you going to be able to get out of the passing offense? Who's going to stand out at receiver after losing Lewis Brown? And then, obviously, how does Donegal look under center? That's going to be a big factor for them. But they're going to be able to rush the passer. They'll be competitive. I think they'll be a 500-ish team. But I have a hard time seeing them be much better than that. At number 9, we're going Wyoming, who I think will be much improved on both sides of the ball. I also think they'll be closer to that 5, 6, 7 range by the time it's all said and done. I just wonder if you have enough depth at the skill positions, and then defensively, kind of like CSU, it's a lot of new pieces that you're asking to come together very quickly, and that's always a challenging spot. Number 10, we're going Utah State. They're such an unknown for me. They lost so much. They made a great hire. I mean, Bronco Mendenhall's about as good of a hire, I think, as you could make in their spot. I think Bryson Barnes, too, with his dual threat athletic background, will be a good fit. He ain't Devin Dampier, though. And so I'm not sure they're going to be able to replicate exactly what they did in Albuquerque this past season. But I wouldn't surprise me if you looked up and Utah State was like a 5-7 type team. Frisky, score some points, do some stuff with the quarterback where they take advantage of his athleticism. But I mean, you lost Jalen Royal as a receiver. It's a lot of unknown at this point. Now I saw Ike Larson is like suspended for the next 6 weeks. I don't think it's 6 games, but a guy who's supposed to be one of the leaders in your locker room, getting suspended, that's not a great sign going into the year in terms of where things are at. And then Bronco Mendenhall is definitely a my way or the highway type coach. Just what is that vibe going to look like? I've got New Mexico at 11, Nevada at 12. New Mexico's potentially frisky. They're going to have a good run game. Defensively, I have no idea what to expect. And really, in the trenches, I have some serious doubts about them being able to hold up. But they do have a talented running back and a quarterback who is at least familiar with the offensive scheme, given that he came over with Eck from Idaho. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, mostly just because I think Nevada is the dumpster fire of the league the last couple of years. They do return 7 starters, and they were more competitive last year. Certainly far more competitive under Jeff Choate than they ever were under Ken Wilson, who was just a clown show. But I just have a hard time seeing it come together. Like offensively, I'm not a Purdy guy. Their skill positions are meh. I mean, you had a good linebacker who lost to Memphis, Brendan Lewis. Their quarterback last year also went to Memphis. You get no community support. Deceptively kind of a tough schedule as well. So I've got Nevada at 12. Shout out to everybody for rocking with us. We'll post all these on Twitter, and everybody can tell me why I was right or why I was wrong. I appreciate everybody that's rocked with us this morning. I got a nice comment. How awesome is Justin? Thanks for being the best CSU podcaster out there. Much love. That means a lot. I really appreciate everybody for tuning in. If it wasn't for the CSU community, I most certainly would not be where I am today, and I never try and take that for granted. I also think we're lucky as Ram fans right now. I think there are, there's multiple CSU podcasts. When I started, it was pretty much just me and the Ram Nation guys. Now you've got like 4 or 5 CSU podcasts, multiple digital outlets. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Kevin Lytle is the best traditional newspaper, print reporter in the state. He murders it. So we're really fortunate, and I'm just fortunate that I get to be a small part of your guys' life, and it means a lot to me. Before we get out of here, I did want to just briefly play a clip of Trey McBride. Obviously, Arizona was in town this past weekend. The Broncos thumped them in a preseason game. The starters didn't play. Super anticlimactic. I could go on a whole 15-minute rant about how the NFL charges season ticket holders full price for these garbage exhibition preseason games and doesn't give you an option to opt out. We're going to keep it positive, though. It was cool to see Trey get so much love. There's 85 jerseys in the stands. People asking for his autograph. He's getting asked questions about being, the best tight end in the league and, putting CSU on the map and all that. So I thought it'd be just kind of a fun way to end the show. If you got any quick questions, comments, anything like that, throw them in the Toyota chat. I can get to them after. But we're about to get out of here. And remember, we'll be going live again Thursday at 11. And then starting next week, I believe we're moving to Monday and Friday, which I'm really excited about. I think that's going to be a nice little balance for us, and we'll get lots of written content, in the middle of the week and over the weekend as well. But here is Trey McBride answering some questions in the Denver media when he was out here for the Cardinals preseason game.
To see him here watching me, and most importantly, just to get some good work in with the Broncos.
We saw you got to talk to Peyton Manning. What was that like?
No, Peyton's a great guy. He's met him a few times, obviously. Grew up watching him. grew up in Colorado, so was able to meet him. But he's a great guy. Obviously saw him at the Pro Bowl, competed against him there. But he's wonderful, and it was just good to chat with him and tell him what's up.
Trey, what does it feel like to come back here, having reached the level that you've already reached in the NFL, to be able to kind of be that guy?
Yeah, it's special, just to come back. Grew up a Broncos fan, so just to come back here and to be here playing, against these guys, the team I grew up watching. So it's very surreal in some aspect, but at the same time, it's just a lot of fun to get up here and be back in Colorado.
Trey, can you make your case for being the best tight end in football, and does that matter to you at all?
No, it doesn't matter to me. Obviously, I think I'm a great tight end, and I think for what we do in this offense, I do a good job. But things like that. But there's a lot of great tight ends in this league, and just to be considered one of the top is a huge honor to me. And grew up watching so many of these guys, so just to be in the same conversation as them is a huge honor to me.
How would you assess what was it like growing up in Fort Morgan?
Fort Morgan, yeah, it was good. It was a small town, but way out east. A small little town. Everybody knew everybody, but I loved it, man. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Trey, kind of building on that, Fort Morgan's put a few guys in the NFL.
Yeah.
What do you think the secret to that is? What
yeah.
that says?
It's cool, man. Joel Dreesen was actually here, watching, so it's cool to see him. Obviously, Ryan Jensen, another guy, but I just think it's the grit, the hard work, everything that comes with Fort Morgan. It's just a small, hometown pride, but most importantly, man, everyone works hard, and it's a blue-collar town, so, hard work gets you where you want to go.
How would you assess your day and then just the offenses overall?
I thought the offense had a really good day today. Couple bad throws here, missed opportunities there, whatever it was, but I think for the most part we executed very well. I'm sure there's a couple plays we'd like to get back, just like every play or every game, whatever, but I thought the offense had a really good day. Obviously, it's never as good as you think. It's never as bad as you think, but I think from where we are and what we came out to do, we did exactly what we needed to do.
Trey, as you look back at yourself at CSU, is it a surprise to you at all? Sometimes you reflect on how quickly you've kind of made this ascent in the league. Any moments of reflection like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very special, coming from Colorado State to, not be in the Power 5, to not play the big schools, to kind of be overlooked in the whole process. It's just it's a blessing to finally get the opportunity to show the world that I can play in this league, I can be a dominant force in this league, but most importantly, man, I'm just taking it day by day, trying to be the best player that I can be, and just trying to continue to grow and get better every day.
Shout out to our guy Trey McBride, forever proud to be, forever Ram, always so humble and articulate in interviews. He's one of those dudes who's just so easy to root for, because not only is he a beast, but he's also just a really incredible guy in real life. Josh in the Toyota chat, depth chart next Monday. If everything is based on how the traditional schedule works, yes, we should get that first depth chart on either Monday or potentially Tuesday. I would assume Monday with the press conference, but I don't want to speak prematurely. Here's another comment we've got in the Twitter chat. I'm a tad late to the party. The 1915 team sent me down a rabbit hole of looking at old results. We used to play high school teams like Longmont and Denver. Crazy times. There's some really weird stuff with college football, like pre-1930, especially. It was pretty much just anarchy in the wild, wild west. And that feels like a pretty good way to put a bow on today's show, which is that, if CSU wanted to claim a natty for 1915, I think they'd be justified in doing so, because it would be just as valid as any of the other claims based on how things went that year. Most certainly, you look at how dominant they were, and winning every game on average 35 to 5 is pretty much making a statement. And I just wonder if they had been, in the East Coast or something like that, would it be a no-brainer that they'd be the national champion? I think that's at least a fair scenario to bring up. Shout out to everybody for rocking with us. I've been kind of all over the place today, but I thought it was a fun show. I appreciate Dion, our awesome producer, making all this happen, making live graphics, getting clips to work so seamlessly. I could not do any of this if it weren't for awesome people like him helping me out. Much love, y'all. Forever proud to be. And thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order.
We all silly like the mayor.